Hello! Today we have a little side project which is to convert this NICAM monitor from European standards or System BG to UK standards or System I. And this is going to be for an up and coming video which is not specifically about NICAM, but I need it for a demonstration in there. Now this unit came to me from Belgium, which is a System BG country, so it's expected that it would be of that standard. This Philips equipment doesn't really ever show up in the UK for some reason or other, so finding a System I version of this unit is pretty unlikely, but they definitely were sold. I do apologise for the lower than usual video quality. My normal camera is presently away being serviced. Now before I get started here, I'm just going to quickly address the matter of why do I always use this Philips equipment when I could be using something from Rohde & Schwarz or Tektronix. There's a couple of reasons. Number one is price. Equipment from Rohde & Schwarz and Tektronix tends to be more sought after, and it's priced higher than Philips equipment. And secondly, equipment from the Danish Philips back in the day actually was the best of the best, priced quite a lot higher than that of competitors, and they generally had better quality, better feature sets, etc. It's just generally just quite a bit nicer, and the fact that I don't have to pay as much for it is a real bonus. And just looking inside it, every time you open these things up, it's just such a treat. The way they design things and all the components in here, these are just all off-the-shelf components. I could keep this running basically forever. And whenever you get a programmable device, it's always going to be something very ordinary, just like a PAL or an EEPROM, and they never security protect anything, so I can always dump the code out of it and have backups just for peace of mind, and easily replace it if I need to. And just in terms of the actual layout of things, it's always just really nice and simple. Everything is nice and easy to get to, and I really quite like it. And this is definitely not true for Rohde & Schwarz. I find their equipment can be quite complicated and convoluted in design. You can spend a good couple of hours just trying to get to the bit that you want to, and then trying to figure out how to put it back together again. And that's on top of having paid a premium price for it, and I just found it wasn't really working for me. So after buying about 3 or so pieces, I kind of stopped. In order to perform this conversion, there's 3 main things that we have to attack here. Number one is the demodulator block, which has this crystal, and this crystal actually represents the carrier frequency. So it came as a 5.85 megahertz, and I've swapped it to a 6.552, and I actually socketed the crystal while I was at it and tied it down so that it doesn't fall out. And that crystal already has the correct characteristics for this circuit, so no additional adjustment needed there. The next thing up here, and probably the most difficult, is the inter-carrier filter. So this isolates the NICAM carrier from a baseband video signal, and it has either a 5.85 megahertz or 6.552 megahertz passband, depending on the standard. This is a 5.85 at the moment. Now changing this thing is potentially going to be pretty difficult, because if you think about it, we're increasing the frequency of the passband by 12%. If we were to say it has an adjustment range of 10%, well, that's outside of that, and you're not even going to have the full 10% anyway. And it does actually say in the manual that the System I version is a different part, so we do need to find the System I version of this filter before we can do this. And lastly, we have the IF filter here. So this isolates the NICAM carrier from an IF signal. So the center frequency of this is going to be either 33.05, which is what it is at the moment, and that has to be decreased to 32.248, I think it is. And that's actually only a very small adjustment, well within margins, so shouldn't need to change any components here. Should just be a case of being able to retune that one. Now when it comes to filters from these guys, 2 things always seem to be true. Number one, the filter will have been skillfully constructed from scratch using industry standard components. Literally, you could still make this thing brand new even today. Number 2, the performance of it is always going to be very, very good. Now we do actually have a stroke of luck here. If we look at the demodulator module from the predecessor of this piece of equipment, this actually is the System I version of it. It's a big and clunky item, very nice bit of kit, but just quite unwieldy, and I'd much rather have this one as a System I if I can do it. This filter here is actually exactly the same form factor and design effectively as this one, so it should just be a case of swapping those over. And yeah, I mean, if you've designed a filter that performs very well, that you can manufacture basically forever, why bother designing a new one? So it should just be a case of just popping that out and pinching the System I filter from the earlier 5688. Just goes straight on there like that, and my understanding is that no adjustments should be necessary. That's just a case of just pop that on there. So yeah, nice if you have it, and I do have it, so might as well use it. So we're about to do a quick test, but before we do, let's just have a look at the rear panel to get an idea of what we're actually doing here. So we've got two inputs, QPSK in, so this is going to be the modulated baseband or the IF input. There's actually a switch internally to select between one or the other, which is kind of odd. On the predecessor, these were separate connectors. Don't know why they combined them, but they did, and yeah, it works. There is also this NICAM input. This is the baseband digital input. We're not going to be looking at that today. We're just going to be feeding a modulated baseband and an IF into here and seeing how they perform. We've got some other connectors on here, like the audio outputs, digital NICAM outputs, data and clock, remote interface TTL, and of course our GPIB there. So we're hooked up to a source now, and as for what that source is, well, I'm not going to be revealing my sources just yet. That'll be for the next video. What we're currently receiving is an intercarrier input, so that's a modulated baseband at 6.552 MHz, so that's passing through that filter that we just replaced, but not passing through the IF filter that we haven't yet adjusted. Looking at the quality here, we've got 93-ish%, and looking at the IQ signals, I mean, I don't really see it getting an awful lot better than that, unless we have some kind of divine modulator, which we don't. So what we're going to do now is connect to the IF input and have a look what that looks like. So here we are with our IF inputs, and yeah, it's looking a bit crap. I mean, our signal quality reading noticeably lower there, and looking at the IQ signals, well, they just look a bit nasty. And the reason for this, as we said, is because the IF filter has not yet been adjusted for System I. So it will be passing some of the NICAM carrier and attenuating the rest of it, which is why we get this rather ugly result here. For adjusting the IF filter, we actually have a particular tailwind today, and that is a copy of the manual. Long-term viewers of this channel will know how rare it is that I actually receive the manuals with this sort of equipment, so it's absolutely fantastic to have it. And it's actually out of its folder at the moment because I'm in the process of scanning it. Now the IF filter adjustment procedure is actually described just in this text here and these diagrams. These guys had a particular talent for saying a lot with very few words, and read between the lines, people. If you're going to be dicking around with this filter, you had better know what you're doing, and we're not going to spoon feed you the information. So let's break down what they're saying here. First of all, it says turn attenuator off, and that's because there's an attenuator at the input of this equipment, and we want to switch that off so that we get the best possible signal to noise ratio on our network analyzer. Input to IF, and we want to set that because if we set it to the other setting, then the signal will go to the wrong place. IF mode split, we'll skip that for the time being, but we'll come back to that. Remove any solder from SP304. That's because this is attached to a 50 ohm termination, and our 50 ohm termination is going to be moving from the internal PCB to the network analyzer. And then it says connect network analyzer to QPSK in and connect to CX302. Now this is another delightfully vague description for quite a complicated procedure. So what we're doing is an S21 measurement, and the output for the network analyzer is going to go to this one, and the input is going to go to CX302. Now this procedure here is the one we're doing, not that first bit about the notch at 45.5, but we are doing this one here, adjusting L307, 308 and C337 until we have that. Plus and minus 320 kilohertz, flat at 0.1 dB. And there's this delightfully vague description here of sound 2 frequency, so this is referring to the NICAM carrier. I don't know if that's an industry thing or a Philips thing. I've never seen this anywhere other than in Philips stuff, so I think this must be their terminology. Now on this page over here there's various diagrams which tell us quite a bit about this filter, and there's quite a bit going on here. So we've got a couple of different peaks that are present here. So there's this one here is the one of interest. This is for system BG, so that's going to be 33.05. And this is our 32.248, I think it is, system I. So that's what we're going to be going to here. This part of it is not changing, and this is showing a couple of different modes here. In this mode it is passing the carrier tone, and in this mode it is notching the carrier tone, and this is for the two different operating modes where it's receiving a NICAM carrier with vision signal and without vision signal, and in which case it uses its own internal oscillator. We don't really care about this today, but I'm just saying what this is all about here. Well, here we are hooked up to the network analyzer, and let's just give a quick overview of the connections here. So this big green cable is our source connection, so that's the output from the network analyzer going into the QPSK input. And our measurement connection is this small little SMA connection here, and this goes down to the main board to that test connector that we talked about earlier. So this is an output from the unit back into the network analyzer, and what we're doing here is just testing the frequency response of that filter. So we're presently looking at roughly the same view which appeared in the manual, and once again I apologize for the piss poor video quality. I think this camera is maybe as much as 15 years old now. So what we'll do just first up is just quickly demonstrate that intercarrier setting which I briefly mentioned. So if you look over here at where the vision carrier is, it's currently notching it out. But if we go to change this to intercarrier mode, it will it changes, so it's now passing the vision carrier. We don't actually care about this today, but I'm just demonstrating it. So we'll switch that back to split. That's what it recommends in the manual. Now the first thing to do here is to check whether or not the unit is presently in good adjustment, because I'm going to be taking a shortcut when I make the adjustments here. So what we're going to do is put on a couple of markers. One marker at 32.73. Megahertz. And another marker at 33.37. I just wrote this down on this piece of paper here. Megahertz. And we'll center this at 33.05 megahertz. And we'll have a span of, let's say, 15 megahertz. 20. Sorry, 10. There we go. So that looks pretty reasonable to me, and it says in the manual that it should be flat within that range. It looks pretty flat, and noticing that it doesn't actually tail off very aggressively before and after the carrier. That's to be expected. This is just the IF filter. It doesn't have to be absolutely amazing. It just has to do a reasonably good job of selecting the NICAM carrier. So now it's time to start thinking about the actual adjustments, and for this I've got two highly specialized tools here. I've got a screwdriver for the capacitor, if I need to adjust it, may not need to. And for the inductors I have this item here, which is, that is actually a raw plug with a shim of copper sandwiched in the middle of it and some heat shrink on it. And this is just so it's non-ferrous, because if you start jamming a screwdriver in an inductor you're going to change its properties. So to make this, what I'm going to do, as I said, is make a shortcut. First of all, let's change this span to 15 megahertz. I think that's a nicer view of it. Then what we're going to do here is, where is it? We're just going to save this trace here, and go back to change our center to 32.348 megahertz, and just display the one that we just saved. So the job here basically is to make this trace here the same as the yellow trace, the same as the orange one. So So it turns out that my camera has a 5-minute video limit, and so unfortunately we lost the end of that procedure. But I think I spent around about 10 minutes on it, and I'm sure that the production line workers had this down to a fine art. Now, just having done this, I noticed that the notch for the vision carrier has moved, so that means there's actually a bit more to this than perhaps I'd anticipated. So what we have to do now is we have to adjust the other half of this filter, annoyingly. Alright, so for adjusting this, I think we're just going to do exactly the same thing, just use this little view that we have here to try and see if we can adjust them. So let's get back onto this inductor here. That's actually looking pretty good. Good enough. Alright, so yeah, there we go. So we have almost exactly what we had before, but it's shifted down from about 700 kHz. So the last thing I had to do here, which I didn't actually end up filming because I spent like 15 minutes mucking around with this, but was to switch it back into split carrier mode, so we're allowing the vision carrier to pass through. And it turns out the filter which does this seems to be affected by adjusting this one, because it was now way off. So we've now got that recentered at 38.9 megahertz, and just a nice curved response there, because all we're doing is taking out a tone. We don't need to have a flat pass band on there like that one. So now I think this is all done, and let's give it a test. So here we are hooked up to our secret source, and the quality reading is exactly the same before, so between 93 and 91%. And looking at the INQ signals on the scope, looking really nice. Now there is actually one other test we have to do, which is an intercarrier test, and that's where we have the vision signal included in the signal. Presently it's receiving just NICAM by itself, so I'm going to have to stop the camera and go set that up. So this is our intercarrier test, so we're receiving vision and NICAM together now, and the quality has actually fallen a little bit down to 89%, and looking at the INQ signals you can see they're just a little bit noisier than they were before, and this is completely to be expected, because we have this noisy bastard of a video signal in the mix now, which those filters have quite a job to get rid of. But yeah, I think this is all good now, and I think that's a job done. Well, this was a nice fun little exercise, and this was made possible by the fact that I had the manual, I had another piece of equipment to borrow some parts from, and of course I had the test equipment necessary to make the adjustments. Had I been missing any of these things, I think this would have been quite a lot more difficult, if not impossible. And this is why videos on this channel tend to be fairly irregular. I spend quite a lot of time between videos mucking around and doing stuff like this, which I don't normally bother to film. But today I decided to film it to see if anybody would find it interesting, and if so, then perhaps we can have a few more videos like this every now and then, but if not, then of course we'll go back to the tried and tested. Anyway, that is all for today, so thanks for watching.